Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is a best-of compilation of 5 of our best-performing episodes of 2025 on how we shape the future. As I look back at these conversations, I realized that each one left me with a key learning that continues to influence how I think, work, and live. From Enass Abo-Hamed, I learned that new sources of energy are on the horizon, but we need to work much harder to make them a reality. From Kabir Sehgal, I learned that creativity grows through practice and that our imperfections and human connections matter more than ever today. From Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir, I learned that intuition is an embodied intelligence that depends on our ability to pay attention in a distracted world. From Anjhula Mya Singh Bais, I learned that mental health is probably the most underrated factor shaping our world today. And from Ameya Prabhu, I learned that India is probably the most exciting place for growth and opportunity right now. Today we revisit these conversations to explore the forces that shape our future. Let's dive in. Up first, we have Dr. Enass Abo-Hamed, who joins us to talk about the energy transition. There's a lot of promise in new energy technologies, but progress and adoption are moving too slowly. Enass explains why some regions are not only lagging, but actually moving backwards, and what it takes to build the energy system we need by 2035. There's a lot of promise in new energy technologies, yet we seem to see slow progress in adaptation, in the build-out. Why isn't the transition happening faster?
What I would say to this is that it's not only that the transition is not happening faster. We're seeing some regression in some areas, in some geographies, impacted by demand, geopolitical issues, and cost prices of alternatives. It seems like big energy companies are moving their confidence towards what used to be, the energy of yesterday instead of the bet, or what needs to happen for adoption to move towards a steady energy transition. And that means that you just see less effects, maybe better returns to shareholders for energy companies, but certainly in terms of energy transition targets and progress towards that, we're not in a good place. We need a different level of commitments. Although we have clear targets, commitments needs to come with the ability to absorb the cost that it takes to transition from something that it didn't exist, it didn't scale to where we need to be. Otherwise, we're always going to be late.
And what are some of the biggest blind spots in today's energy conversation?
In my opinion, it is becoming very common to present things in an optimistic lens, instead of saying that actually we haven't done enough to meet the targets that we have set for ourselves. And when you're unable to, bring accountability to a conversation or agree on what accountability means. So when you set targets, you don't reverse based on, political moods in various places, or economical favorism for short-term returns, because climate change is the biggest problem of our generation, and we might still be able to solve it with the right levels of commitments, but that should be actioned at a completely different pace to what we're seeing today. And I think that the blind spot is that when we present things at big climate conferences, we don't talk about what we're not doing very well, right? I think the optimism in the presentation is allowing us not to hold ourselves accountable to all the things that we should be doing and we're not.
Hi there. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying What's Next and find value in these conversations, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe or follow the podcast. It's the best way to make sure you never miss an episode, and it helps us bring more incredible insights to you. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you for being part of this journey. So you can answer this question in an optimistic or pessimistic way, depending on how you see fit. What do you think the energy ecosystem will look like in 2035?
So maybe to follow on the answer from the past question, there's a lot of room for optimism for the energy system to look better in a decade. Actually, 10 years is a good enough amount of time for change to happen and to be measured. So a wishful vision, I'd say that, we'd commit to change and would accept economical cost to build the right energy systems that normally is shaped by demand and growth. So we need to commit to demand creation and acceptance of economic cost that enables shaping an energy system in 2035 that is less emitting, that is more efficient in terms of integrating AI and all the advanced technologies that allows to measure, monitor, and enable really reducing emissions, but also increase productivity and also enable increasing profitability through data and knowledge and intelligence that you could predict and trade.
Some people say that the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities. So energy seems to be a big problem, which enables a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurship, right? So in which areas do you see maybe the biggest opportunities for entrepreneurship in the energy space?
I think where there is a huge amount of demand, data center, AI infrastructure, where there's a huge amount of demand and you don't need to create market demand, and where you have a matching solution that not only addresses demand, but also have a viable business model behind it and measured output in terms of reducing emissions.
That was Enass Abo-Hamed with a clear view of why the energy transition is moving slowly and what real future commitments are required. Now we turn to the world of creativity. Kabir Sehgal joins us to explore what it means to stay authentically creative in a world shaped by AI. He talks about the danger of relying too heavily on technology, why practicing a personal craft matters more than ever, and why our imperfections and in-person connection might be the most future-proof creative skill we have. Do you think that there's a risk of unlearning creativity if we rely too much on AI?
Yes, there's a risk if we as a species, humans, unlearn creativity. Like we're so interdependent now. What happens when there's a true disaster? Who knows how to actually, make shelter and find the food and stuff like that? Yes. But I do think this is why I spend so much time practicing guitar. That might seem like a trivial thing, like practicing an hour or two of guitar, or quaint, like I'm doing falconry or something, and these days. But I do find that when I do play guitar for folks, or when I get out, that's the part that connects most with folks. I want to be able to express myself through the human voice, and if that sounds good or that doesn't sound good. So there's totally, if you're constantly relying on AI to connecting with people through the feed, the social media feeds, it's going to sound like drivel. And the more you can, this is why I'm saying the premium to personally connect is so important, because we as humans are going to become way more interdependent. We're going to start sounding like everyone else. And you already see that online. Everyone kind of sounds like each other. And so that's why it's important to, if you can, pick one thing and try to cultivate that. And you'll truly or learn a skill, right? So I think that's important for vocational schools. You see that in the United States, the importance of vocational training, learning a craft, learning a trade. Not everyone has to be, a computer scientist, actually learning quote unquote real skills is an important evolution for skill development, especially in the United States and across the world.
And when we look 10 years into the future, what creative skills do you think will still be uniquely human? Is it this element of connection, or is there more?
It's probably more, I would hope. I still think art is timeless, and the ability to move people through the written or sung word, or filmmaking. I mean, so much is being replicated. You want to hold on to the stuff that makes us human. What makes us human? Our flaws, our imperfections. Nathaniel Hawthorne, the great writer, talked about how the bond of humanity is imperfection, which is funny. It's when I make music, there's a button on the console to humanize the music now, which means that, okay, not everything should be on the grid. It should have a little bit of variation in velocity of how a note's struck or the timing of it. So there's watch out. There's the humanized button. It's when AI becomes too perfect, it's going to account for us. And maybe the word human in the future will be this quaint notion of people who, just are a little slow or a little imperfect. But yeah, I do think like, I keep saying connection, but that's really what it is. Like, when was the last time you were truly wowed by an in-person experience? You may go to more events than I do. I rarely go to events anymore these days. But when I go to one, I'm like, wow, like I'm glad we're all together, the power of convening. So this is maybe why like conferences and events are hopefully going to make a comeback.
Yes, I agree. Is creativity something that can be learned, or is it innate?
I think it's both. I mean, human evolution is basically one of creativity, finding fire and trying to survive. Because when you're trying to survive, you'll do whatever, necessity is the mother of invention. You've heard the phrase. So you can say the big leaps in human evolution, the big leaps in human development have been when we're trying to like survive, or in periods of interglaciation. And there's ice ages where we have to struggle to survive and find the food. And that's apparently when our brains expanded, or our skulls expanded. So like from an evolutionary standpoint, yeah, survival has been important for creation, and it's something that humans, we need to keep doing. I'm almost concerned that with the rise of AI tools, we're not struggling as much, right? Like things are so easy now. That's the one downside is it making us all a bit shallower, that like, yeah, we can find anything on the internet. So why do I have to know it? Which, has pros and cons, because when you're not on the internet or not with AI, then you're kind of like a shell of a person, right? So this is why I do encourage like stepping away from the feed, stepping away from the computer, and truly reading. When was the last time you read a book? Why don't I write long books anymore? Because I let people read. So it's it's a challenge. That's something I'm concerned with.
Practice and real-world connection matter more than ever. Now we move to intuition. Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir explains the difference between intuition, gut feeling, and bias, describing intuition as an embodied intelligence that draws on unconscious information. She also shares insights from neuroscience about attention, the mind-body connection, and how to use intuition well in a noisy world. You talked about the fact that actually many people confuse intuition with gut feeling or even bias. How can we tell the difference and make sure that we use intuition effectively?
Yeah, so this is another great question. So I want to start just by zooming out a little bit. Intuition is an embodied feeling. It's an embodied intelligence. What this means is that intuition taps into our unconsciousness, which is the biggest part of our whole conscious mind, or whole consciousness, sorry. So this means that through our whole body, we are picking up data and sensory information 24/7. And so in order to tap into this, the first basic thing we need to do is to be self-aware and to be able to practice metacognition. And what this means is training ourselves in monitoring and understanding how it is that our intuition speaks to us in a certain context or environment. So when people talk about gut feelings, it's not entirely off, not at all. So sometimes people will describe, there's this famous mountaineer who wanted to climb Everest. He was almost at the top when he decided last minute not to summit. It was a gut feeling that he followed. Where did it come from? It came from a pattern recognition in his unconsciousness that he had developed over time, having done similar things in varying settings. And so our body speaks to us in these ways, which only we can become experts in. But when it comes to biases and fears and wishful thinking, prejudice, it's super important to learn to hone and harness a strong intuition and be able to understand and discern it from these things. So in a way, I've mentioned that it's important to be self-aware and understand how your intuition functions, when it works well and when it doesn't. But when we talk about biases, we have many biases as humans. There are so many, like there are between 200 and 300 or whatever.
Yes.
First of all, we need to know that we have biases. And then secondly, we need to understand at least how some of them work. And in essence, this requires a level of critical thinking. So this is another element of how when you hone and harness your intuition, it's not just something that comes out of nowhere. You actually need to think critically about how you show up in the world and how you take in information, what information you're taking in, because most of them are unconscious, right?
Yes.
And so it's all these things that we need to be aware of.
Okay, so you talked a lot about subconscious, unconscious. So to many listeners, this might sound a little bit spiritual, but there's also a lot of research on the topic, right? So can you maybe share some of the findings that neuroscience has given us about intuition?
Yeah, absolutely. So we take a lot of decisions. We make a lot of choices. We go through the day basing our choices on unconscious hints and signals. And I think for the listener, just to pause a little bit and think about that and remember, at least, I mean, it's easy to recollect how that happens. There is a lot of information that we store in our unconsciousness. So neuroscience has also been drawing our attention to the fact that in the information storm that we are living through today, attention is a scarce resource. It's been that for forever for humans, focused attention. It's even scarcer today. And so it becomes more important to be disciplined, more aware of how you pay attention and what you take in, because it's informing your decisions. Understanding that most of the things that we take in as we immerse ourselves in our environments are unconscious, but they're still informing our minds. You know, so just this realization is really important. Another thing that I find super important and fascinating is that neuroscience has been opening up this world to us, which has to do with the mind-body and how we co-regulate as a species.
That was Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir with a fascinating look on intuition as an embodied intelligence. Now we turn to mental health. Dr. Anjhula Mya Singh Bais explains why mental health is one of the most underappreciated forces shaping the future. She shows how unprocessed trauma and unchecked ego influence decision at every level of society, and how technology can either deepen avoidance or help build emotional literacy. Do you believe that mental health is one of the most underappreciated forces shaping the future?
Well, I think human beings have a bias towards what they can see, what they can measure, an objective sort of external focus of control. And of course, there's so much empirical science underlying psychology, but it's also something that invisibly governs decision-making at every level, right? Whether it's the family, the state, institutions. And so whether it's from conflict escalation to innovation paralysis, when you have unprocessed trauma and an unchecked ego, that's going to shape outcomes that oftentimes we as a society or population that we mislabel as, oh, it's political or it's economic. Mental health, and the COVID pandemic has really demonstrated this. Mental health is not the side dish. It's the architecture of leadership itself.
And although there's a growing debate around this topic now globally, where do you feel that there are still elements in which the debate is falling short?
I think, yes, of course, the stigma is lifting. I can see that, in my own practice. I'd say a decade ago, there would just be a huge stigma to seek therapy. Or if you need a psychologist, you must necessarily be crazy. So that stigma is lifting, but the framing is still very diagnostic and Western-centric. As a populace, we discuss symptoms, but not the systems. And if we're talking about inclusivity, sort of the indigenous wisdom, the global south, and this kind of embodied knowledge, all of that still remains a footnote. So we really need to make room for pluralistic psychologies that account for caste, climate, colonialism, and more than ever, connection.
And you've worked with many different people, from trauma to survivors to executives. Do you see any patterns that are similar when it comes to mental health across these different environments?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That adage that, if you cut a human being, we all bleed red. Both, whether you're a trauma survivor or a CEO at the helm of the biggest sort of conglomerate or company, both carry armor. So trauma survivors, they often distrust safety. Executives often conflate worth with performance. But I think if you look beneath that, there's a yearning to be seen. and that is a yearning to be seen without conditions. So healing happens when you create spaces where people don't have to audition for their humanity.
Which can be very difficult in specific situations, especially when you look at the workplace, right?
I think we're incentivizing the wrong things.
And what role has technology played in mental health?
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword. In one way, it's democratized, rather, access. But then I also say it's digitalized avoidance. So, sometimes I look at workplace policies and I'm there to consult on them. I want to be graceful with the benefit of doubt. I'm sure they mean well, but it's like a meditation app is not going to fix a broken workplace or systemic burnout. And on the flip side, though, if we design these policies and utilize technology when it's sort of designed with ethics and empathy, then you can actually scale emotional literacy. If you have emotional literacy, then it's sort of like a social vaccine.
Some people argue, though, that social media is basically putting fuel on the problem rather than being a cure. Yeah? So do you think that this is something that we should pay close attention to right now?
I do. I do think it's something we should pay close attention to. But having said that, it's almost to sort of apply a sort of a Buddhist learning or metaphor. Anything is neutral. It's how you use it, right? So a knife in the hands of a criminal can warrant death. A knife in the hands of a surgeon can warrant life. This is why, whether, let's say with AI, it's not just technologists that need to be in the room designing these things. It needs people from the humanities, historians, psychologists. It needs to reflect the diversity and plurality of people, and then we build safeguards, and then it can work to uplift society.
That was Dr. Anjhula Mya Singh Bais showing how mental health influences outcomes across society and how technology can either help or harm. To close out this compilation, we turn to Ameya Prabhu, who challenges some of the biggest misconceptions about India, from the size of its economy to the diversity of its society. He describes India as a microcosm of the world and explains what that means for investors and the global landscape. So people have many prejudices maybe also about India and the way life is in India. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions people have about India?
I'll give you a few. So once I had a delegation coming from Europe who wanted to invest in India, and they actually came to this office, to this very room where I'm sitting right now. And they were brought by one banker, and then they wanted to invest. They wanted to talk to our investment banking team. And they were actually surprised as to how developed India was in terms of, they thought they'll come here, buy things cheap, give some knowledge and make money. And actually, a lot of the companies they actually invest in are a lot smaller than the companies in India. So actually their companies are better targets for us to buy than the other way around. So of course, I think these are probably an outlier. I think these are people who don't really do their homework and come in terms of understanding. But I think one misconception a lot of people have is we're actually a fairly large economy today. We're actually not fairly large. We're the fifth largest and soon to be the fourth largest economy. We'll overtake Germany very shortly. On a overall GDP perspective, we have a long way to go on GDP per capita. Or this is on a nominal GDP basis. If you look at purchasing power, we're already the third largest. So I think that's one big misconception people have. The second, I would say, misconception a lot of people have is the fact that, and again, depends on who, I must admit, but I think a lot of people feel that India as an economy is generally primarily catering to the, I would say, mid to poorer sections of society. Now, we are a large country. We are about just under 1.5 billion people. So you have all sections of society. You have some of the richest people in the world who will be richer than any, and we have also a substantial amount of people who are around the poverty line or also below the poverty line. So you have to cater to the entire spectrum. So I think when you come to India, it's actually a microcosm of the world when you come here. So as a business, when you come, you need to look at the entire spectrum rather than just think of India as, say, a middle income country or a lower income country, because you'll be surprised to see that even on the luxury goods side today, the luxury goods segment is one of the best performing segments in India today. Now, people are recognizing that, even on, let's say, concerts, like the amount of concerts that have happened, not just in Mumbai or a Delhi, but in Ahmedabad or in a Shillong. Like Ed Sheeran played in Shillong, which is in a small city in northeast of India. It's like, in Meghalaya, it's a very small state in the northeast of our country. So, and of course, Coldplay was in Ahmedabad, and we had 2 concerts. I think they had 2 or 3 concerts, and each of them had 120,000 people, each of them. So you can imagine the scale, of like that. So basically, I think 1/4, like 30% of Slovenia's population attended these 2 concerts, so the equivalent. So I think, so that's the second misconception. And I think third, I think people, and I think this is probably changing, and I think it's changed a lot in the last few years. But say when I was in college 20 years ago, I think people used to think of maybe India as not as forward as, for example, the rest of the world. And I think that again it depends. There were parts of the country which were not, but there were also parts of the country which were, I think if you see. So I think, but again, that I would say that misconception has changed a lot. Like I remember now when you go as an Indian globally, they all think that you are some super techie, which I'm not, I'm an economist, but they think you have like great tech knowledge, and then maybe that's a misconception. I think everyone thinks that all Indians are good in technology, I mean, a lot of us are not. Like I'm not, I'm the last. I got a message from one of my IT support team just before this podcast saying that the CCTVs are all working properly, sir. And I was like, if you had asked me to fix it, I have no clue, what to do. So I think that's how bad I am when it comes to tech. So I think so again, we are a microcosm for the world. We have economists, we have actors, we are 1.5 billion people. So you can imagine we have a population larger than Europe. So you can imagine how that goes.
That was Ameya Prabhu with a grounded look at India as a fast-growing and often misunderstood global force. That is it for this best-of compilation on how we shape the future, from energy and creativity to intuition, mental health, and India's role in the world. If these segments resonated with you, you can find the full episodes in the show notes. If you enjoyed this format, please follow, subscribe, and share the show. Thanks for watching or listening. We will see you next time.